Just want to briefly provide an introduction that the agency VAG is responsible for a variety of different responsibilities, and one of our primary responsibilities is inspection and enforcement of farms. We provide oversight to a number of large, medium, and certified small farms, as well as small farms that don't meet the threshold for a certified small farm, as well as custom applicators and soon to be technical service providers. So this is an aspect of our division's work, but it's not what I'm going to focus on today. The two things I want to highlight for you today are some of our technical assistance and on-farm programs. So we work with a variety of service providers statewide to provide educational events, outreach visits, and technical assistance visits to farms. Some of the major folks that you might have interacted with in one way or another are UVM extension staff, as well as local conservation district staff. We also work closely, have active agreements with Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, land treatment planning staff, the Franklin Watershed Alliance of Farmers Watershed Alliance of Franklin and Grand Isle, the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, as well as the Addison County River Watch Collaborative. So those are just some of the active agreements we have with local service providers. So as much as we do a lot, within our agency staff, there's a lot of local service providers that might be available to assist you or a farm in whatever kind of endeavor you're working on. Here's some photos to help highlight that. So, one of the goals is ensuring that there's educational opportunities available for Vermont farms. One, so that they can understand changes and regulations and have resources and information available to them, but also to meet their credit requirements, which are part of their regulatory requirements. And what I'm hoping to focus most of our time on today is the on-farm implementation programs that are available through the Vermont Agency VAG Water Quality Division. I will note there are a variety of other grant programs the Agency VAG provides to farms throughout the state. I'm going to focus specifically on the water quality assistance programs. Last year, we worked providing assistance towards around 30,000 acres of agronomic practice implementation. We put about 5.6 million towards on-farm projects. There's an example of one of our BMP projects on the right-hand side of the screen, and a quote from that farmer who, I think an important thing to understand is a lot of farms don't have the net income to support investments in these practices without some state assistance, and that's really where our programs are meaning to step in and help projects get on the ground. A similar theme that we hear often is, without this program, I would not have been able to complete this project. And we focus on leveraging both federal expenditure through existing EQIP contracts, as well as leveraging funds from Vermont farms who are often required to pay at least 10% or more of the practice cost. The first program I'll go over is called FAP. It's a farm agronomic practice. This is a fairly straightforward program. It's designed to be intuitive for farms to be able to apply on their own without assistance. It's a simple application. It runs annually and has historically functioned on a first come, first served basis. The program for this year opens up on May 1st. So one thing to keep in mind is we run our programs on a state fiscal year cycle. So that means that we usually don't have a budget until July 1st each year. So we'll open the program this May. Any applications for rotational grazing assistance will be due in June, and any cover crop assistance applications are required before August 1st. But generally speaking, 30 days prior to any due date is when we would require an application. Sorry, I'm in the office. Some of the typical practices we tend to work with farms on under this program are cover cropping and manure injection. Rotational grazing is fairly new, but we've seen a lot of interest in that program. The payment rate is going to vary by practice as well as the practice requirements. So just to give an example, cover cropping, we've provided two rates. There's a drilled or otherwise incorporated rate, so 75 pounds to an acre seeding rate, planted by October 15th, or you can get a $30 per acre rate if you plant by October 1st for broadcast or interseeded cover crop. The BMP program is another common and sort of well-known program that our agency offers. This program has, I'd say, three major types of assistance. The primary is state funding assistance for a variety of structural improvements on farms. These range from, a clean water diversion project, so collecting the water off a barn roof and diverting it, to heavy use area improvements that will help a farmer manage agricultural waste on their barnyard or heavy use area. If you're interested in or have a farm interested in assistance, the state-only funds have an April 1st deadline for applications. You can apply anytime, but like I said, we work with an annual budget cycle, so it's in your best interest to have that application submitted by April 1st. Typically, those state-only programs are going to require a preliminary cost estimate and a preliminary design. If you are working with an engineering firm, right, if a farm has another engineer, they could take that and then go to the state for some assistance. One of the things that the other services this program can offer is technical assistance to help develop that preliminary cost and design estimates in order to apply for state assistance. So you can apply at any time for engineering technical assistance. We have a team of engineers who work statewide to help folks through this program. And I know Rob is on the phone, so Rob, if there's anything you want to add about the BMP program, feel free to jump on. I'll just highlight the third service provided under this program, which is an EQIP assist. So if a farm is working through a farmstead contract under the NRCS EQIP program, they're eligible to receive state assistance towards that contract, towards the total project cost. There's some cost share limitations around that, so it's really good to get in touch sooner than later to discuss the details of any specific project. Rob, I'll give you some space if you want to add on to the BMP program.
No, Nina, you did a very nice job there outlining that program there for us. But farms do not need to have like that whole cost estimate and design done beforehand. We can meet with them and that can get developed too. Yes, it is great that some farmers have all that put together when we show up the first time, but that's not required to have in place when we meet with farms.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
I did just highlight our engineers' contact information on this next slide. So like I said, we have a handful of different engineers who work across the state. And if you're interested or have questions about, how to navigate this program, I just encourage you to get in touch. They're all really friendly, great people. And just, if you have a project, it's always better to get in touch sooner than later and kind of understand how the program works and what the timeline is. Urgent requests, we do our best, but we have a lot of farms that we try to work with and serve. So between that and budgets, just get in touch sooner than later. The next program I want to speak about is the Capital Equipment Assistance Program. This is a program that can provide 90% cost share towards equipment purchases. Depending on the type of equipment, there's a different cap. So on an annual basis, we revisit these caps and determine if there should be any changes made. Just to give you an example, within the manure management equipment, the cap is typically around $50,000. No matter what the equipment cost is, we cannot pay more than 90% of the cost of the equipment. So we can provide funding up to a maximum or 90%, whichever comes first. Another category of equipment that's fairly popular in this program is cover crop and field improvement equipment. So we do a lot of cost sharing towards no-till grain drills. As part of this program, farms are basically held to meeting a certain performance goal. So if part of their application states that they're interested in a no-till grain drill for cover cropping, they're going to be required to indicate how many acres of cover cropping they anticipate to implement each season, they'll be required to report for the first 3 years of their agreement on their total acreage. And the agency also does field sites to verify their practices and proper operation of equipment. Some other kind of exciting types of equipment that we do provide assistance towards is precision ag equipment. So, planting equipment, manure management equipment, and record keeping, as well as some of the yield constituent sensing and harvest setups for precision ag. Typically, we've run on a biannual basis an opportunity for phosphorus separation, extraction, treatment technologies. This includes some of the really innovative equipment such as a DAF unit or a dissolved air flotation. These come with a very high price tag and correspond to a much higher cap. So usually we open this every year, September 1st. That's a good time to go and check out what the sideboards are, what caps are, depending on the type of equipment. And applications are due November 1st annually. We usually run about $1 million through this program, so we try to support about 30 projects annually. And then they are required, if awarded, to purchase the equipment prior to June 1st the following season. So the goal is really that you apply when you're ready, a farm is ready to purchase, because there's a kind of a required purchase date, basically, once the grant award goes into place. The Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, this is a quasi state and federal program. It's a collaboration between the Agency of Ag and the Farm Service Agency and potentially other organizations, sometimes including U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Friends of Fish and Wildlife. This program provides an incentive payment as well as annual rental payments and assistance towards the implementation of filter strips, riparian forest buffers, and grass waterways. Depending on the project, there are also assistance towards other aspects. So like, let's say a farm is converting a pasture area into a riparian buffer, some of the fencing and or livestock crossing can often be included in that CREP plan. I listed the contact information here for 2 of our staff members who are CREP planners in our office. Another way for a farmer to kind of work through this program is to visit their local FSA office. And local NRCS staff will also be able to help point them in the right direction and get them started. This program, like I said, it's quasi state and federal, so there are some paperwork processes. It takes a little bit of time to get through. So if you have someone who's interested or a potential site, recommend getting in touch sooner than later to start the planning process. The pasture surface water fencing program is a fairly new program at the Agency of Ag. This program provides payments towards certain aspects of a farm's pasture. This could be general pasture improvements to help improve water quality, or excluding livestock from surface water, so putting up fence in an area to exclude livestock, and potentially developing some of the water sources needed to support managing livestock in that way. And then, so if they're in a pasture and they need water because you're fencing them out of what was their water access, we can help support transition to a watering system. There are caps depending on what practice is in that plan. And this program kind of comes with some of the technical assistance around planning that, whatever projects are going in. I think Caitlin is still on the call. If you want to add anything, Caitlin, to kind of best next steps if someone's interested in this program or some of the requirements under the program.
Yeah, I can just add a couple other requirements for the program are just that the program is intended, to have the largest impact we can as on water quality through our pasture management and surface water exclusion in pasture. So farms that are eligible are farms that are, under agency jurisdiction. So having 4 acres involved in agricultural activities, whether that's pasture, and then meeting the minimum animal requirements. So whether that's 4 horses or 15 sheep or 15 goats or, something like that, or if they're generating income off their property and meeting that $2,000 minimum. And there's a couple other little nuances there that I'm happy to chat with folks about. But essentially just that if there's, super small backyard farmer, they likely wouldn't be eligible for the program. And then the only other component that it's just important to note is that if acreage that has been clear cut to make more pasture is not eligible in this program, just because we don't want to incentivize clear cutting forests, which are the best for water quality more so than even a well-managed pasture. So if anyone has additional questions about this program, you can always reach out to me at any time. It is becoming a more popular program. So we're getting a lot of interest in it, which is wonderful. So welcome any questions that folks might have about that via email or phone call after this Zoom.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'll just mention the, RAP applicability to a farm and kind of meeting what we call the definition of a farm is a requirement for all of our cost share programs. There are some exceptions in the CREP program where they might develop an agreement with the landowner rather than the farm operator. The last one I'll talk about at this time is also a fairly new program. It's called the Grass Waterway and Filtership Program. This program can provide a incentive payment per acre of $500. And it's a 10-year agreement to kind of manage a certain area of land that was previously in annual crop production to transition it to a filtership, critical area seeding, or grass waterway. And the critical area seeding is really meant for like a really small field that, if you put a nice filter strip around 3 sides of it, you pretty much have the whole field. We're willing to work with the entire field area. And you can get in touch with me if you have a farmer who's interested in this program. We do have, we do work with them to develop a plan and provide the technical assistance to install this practice as well. So some of the things to be aware of with anyone who's looking to, apply for or enroll in any of our cost share assistance programs. There's some differences to enrolling with NRCS programs. And then there's some ones that are specific to state programming. So as a new grant recipient, you often have to submit a federal W-9 form. As state employees, we cannot provide advice on how to fill out this W-9 form. So it's best to kind of have a tax advisor give you advice if you have any concerns or have any confusion around how your business is structured. I'll just throw a bone out there. Zach is on the call today with UVM, and he's a great resource for folks who have questions about their business. And a great first stop really for people if they're just starting to think about what types of practices they'd be interested to put in and how to make that work within their business scheme. Another requirement is a certificate of insurance. So for all agency programs apart from FAP, you're required to maintain certain minimum liability coverage before you're eligible to receive a grant with us. And this is part of what we call Attachment C. These are standard state provisions for all grants and contracts through the state of Vermont. And that's available online if you're interested in understanding what those standard requirements are. Another requirement is Act 154, good standing. This has to do with ensuring you're actively in good standing when it comes to state and federal water quality regulations. It is a self-certification form that we do additional information for. I will mention a lot of farms receive this form and get confused about who's supposed to fill it out. The farm is meant to complete the form as a authorized representative of the grant applicant organization. And that's something we work with farms on, at the time of award. So once you get to applying, it's kind of, you apply to the program and then you're often required to complete and submit some of these forms. The last thing I'll mention is, we definitely work with folks to make sure they're all up to date as far as their permit and other regulatory filing paperwork. So for instance, if you're working with a small farm, you're not sure if they've ever certified, it's a good measure to just get them through the CSFO certification process before they start applying for grants with the agency, just to help move things along a little bit smoother and reduce time if comes up in the granting process and kind of holds things back. just want to give you guys a sense of the extent of implementation and awards under these programs. So FAP has grown pretty considerably in the last few years. We're upwards towards the 700,000 in expenditure, over about 160 grants this season. BMP runs a budget around 3.5 million to 4 million, depending on the year. The SEEP program, we usually work with around 30 projects annually. Historically, we've managed the budget around $1 million in order to support those 30 different projects annually. Pasture surface water fencing has increased pretty significantly in the past few years, and there's been some new cost share policy developed under that program. Roughly around 35 practices. I don't know the exact number of farms off the top of my head, but grass waterway as well is a smaller program. We're looking at around 15 acres of installed practices in the previous fiscal. And as many of you are aware, CREP has been what we refer to it as offline the past few years, but it is back online now and available to Vermont farms. So we should see some implementation. I think there's a few projects in process at this time. If you're interested in learning more, applying or accessing some of the forms for these programs, such as an application, the first step I would recommend is going to our website, which is agriculture.vermont.gov. There's two ways you can access water quality assistance programs. The first is on the left-hand column, there's a tab for water quality. And then you'll see this little dollar sign that helps you navigate to our assistance programs in the water quality division. If you go to the link at the top of the web page, it's going to take you to all agency programs. So there's other programs the agency runs, such as working lands, that are available to farms, but not necessarily a direct program for water quality improvements. And at this time, I will open it up to questions from the group.
I have a question. As we look at sort of more money becoming available for water quality, has the Agency of Ag decided like which of these programs they might increase funding for?
Trying to think about how to address your question, Joe.
Well, it came to my attention about equipment, but I realized that it's not limited to equipment. I'm on the VHCB advisory committee, and as VHCB folks know, I'm like, okay, VHCB is now getting applications for equipment, and I'm like, is that the best use of VHCB funds, which are really intended to sort of leverage other things and meet critical needs? And my opinion is that it's too bad to use VHCB funds for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I can.
Other creative things that don't fit in the mold of NRCS or traditional BMP activities. It'd be fun to be able to support more of those.
Yeah, I'll just say, I don't know of any like new programs we see developing over the next couple of years. We are in the process of piloting what we call ag resource management, which is a far and few in between approach to working with a farm to basically take the land out of production only when there's enough required to be changed infrastructure wise and field wise. It's just not a site that's really in great shape to continue in annual crop production or supporting livestock. So I think that's one kind of new creative area. Pretty much, the funding we have at this point is supporting these programs moving forward for the near future. And I will just add, we go into each year basically looking at what funding changes and how that's going to impact our program. So to give you an example, we had about $1 million difference between our capital fund budget for this next season. So, we're likely to see some impacts in our capital funded programs, which include BMP and SEEP. That money was transferred into, soft money, which comes from the Clean Water Fund. So, we anticipate being able to support the programs potentially at the same level, but it's just a conversation around, the best use of those funds, which, as we know, capital funds are for capital projects and soft funds are what we employ and provide, all of the people on this call with funding for the most part to continue doing their job. So that was a really not a clear answer, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just sort of raising the issue. Not necessarily that you'll have the answers. But,
I think the other important thing to note there is, how our programs all work together is a really important thing to pay attention to. So the VHCB funds, as you mentioned, have historically been used as a leverage source. So, in some instances, it's a BMP project where cost overages have gone, price of lumber has driven things 20% above where they used to be, and the total project cost comes in and the farmer is left with a bill and they have absolutely no funds to support paying for it. But we see similar stuff happen within our equipment programs too. So to give you an example of some projects we're working on now, we had a couple farms who initially we'd awarded a grant to do a manure project. They were interested in purchasing a manure injector and we were all for it. But in order to do that, they had to get a tanker for the injection unit to be mounted towards. And our program doesn't historically provide funding towards the tankers. We encourage them to apply for VHCB. I don't know if they did, but those projects without that additional support are unlikely to be able to move forward. It's just the investment, the investment up front is just too much for folks who are coming in at a net loss for their business for the year.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Danielle's got a question and she's got one in the chat, so hopefully she can summarize both of them. Or
yeah, it's the same one, Nina. I just want to make sure. So do you want me to read it or do you already have it in your head?
Yeah, if you don't mind reading it out loud, that'd be great.
No problem. So in general, is there a timeline for starting to plan for all these grants? For example, a basin plan may have specific strategies, practices for specific watersheds. We contract with NRCDs on implementation development of these practices. When would we want to time outreach? Sorry, my chat just disappeared. When would we want to time outreach in these areas so that those who are interested, which farmers are interested in funding, would be ready to apply when funds become available?
Great question. And I'm glad you asked it because we were working on this year. So much is up to these annual budget cycles that, we got some feedback. It's really hard to plan ahead. So we did publish, if you're on our assistance programs page, on the left-hand menu for water quality, there is a link up top and it's 2021 grant application deadlines for all programs.
Nice.
This resource is available as a PDF form, and the goal is really so folks can plan ahead for this season. I think my goal is to help support our programs to kind of maintain these annual deadlines so that folks can plan ahead and understand how often programs are run and when is a good time to plan. Some of our programs have and continue to kind of function on a year-round basis, in which case you just sort of get in touch when you can, but we'll see if we decide to transition those to kind of an annual deadline so folks can plan ahead as to when to apply. And like I said, there's certain aspects of certain programs. So like SEEP, sometimes we, on a biannual basis, we've run an innovative phosphorus separation extraction equipment opportunity, but the equipment program tends to run annually.
Awesome.
And
thank you for doing that.
I'll stick this in the chat so folks can access it and print a copy or download a copy for their own use. Chip has a question. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering if you could expand on good standing and, how standing affects eligibility for certain programs and what Agency of Ag does regarding, I understand it's a self-certification, but what does the agency do for follow-up or confirmation of standing?
Yeah, so for the Act 154 good standing process, when a farm applies and is provided an award, it's part of the process before the award can be, I'll call it official, that a good standing verification is done. So that's through our enforcement processes at the Agency of Ag, of which there's a few. We have the animal health, food safety, which is like meat inspection, and then the water quality and public health ag resource management enforcement processes. So prior to kind of confirming an award with any applicant, they are asked to, those lists of applicants are run by all of our active enforcement. I will mention there was a statutory change. See if I can find the reference. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago to kind of clarify. So when, Act 154 was passed, I think it was the Agency of Administration, we were sort of like, oh, how do we manage this? Because our job is in statute to assist farms in coming into compliance with water quality regulations. So we did have some statutory clarification passed that helped define what good standing means when we're talking about water quality in our programs. So it's defined as someone who is in final order with the secretary, which is a specific place in an enforcement action. So my advice, if you're working with someone who is in an active enforcement, would be to, have them apply and go through the process. And when it comes to the time of granting, which is when good standing is evaluated, we'll have conversations with them if there is an issue that precludes them from being eligible for our programs.
Great, thanks.
Mariah sent a note in the chat, and I don't know if you want to.
Sorry, it wasn't really a question. I was actually taking notes on my end too, but that was really helpful to know because I know, especially with all of even the COVID relief stuff that had come out, W-9s have been really tricky. So just very helpful to know like what's allowable with the state and what you guys can help with and where, we might refer folks other places.
We did develop a guidance document, and it's really, so basically the only thing that we're legally allowed to do is to provide them information about what's in the direction. So you can take a federal W-9 form and you can say the directions say this, this, and this. So we pulled a couple of common mistakes and developed a W-9 guidance document out. Happy to share that with you offline, Mariah, if you have folks who come across it. But yeah, we definitely have it's one of the hardest forms to fill out with farms, as many of you are probably aware. Are there any other questions that folks have, either about our program specifically, or about how they work with other programs or leverage other programs?
I have a quick question about FAPs for hay fields. So at UVM, we were recently, there's been different information about how hay fields have a lot of runoff, and in some cases actually more runoff than cropland, like with the Lamoille Water Quality Group. I think it was last week, we were looking at some statistics and it showed that a lot of these hay fields in the state have actually more runoff, which was unexpected, because everyone thinks always cropland. But anyways, so we were talking about what were some things that we could investigate as far as like what are best practices for hay fields to prevent this type of runoff. And I can see that in the FAPs, there's the only payment for good hayland practices is for drill seeding, I think, right?
Yeah, that's accurate. I will mention, if one of the practices we've been working with a lot of folks to incentivize and encourage and support equipment acquisition is grassland injection. So if it's got to be a specific type of injection equipment. Not every injector can inject manure on grassland, but it's definitely a practice we're supporting, either via FAP payments at $25 per acre or via acquisition of the equipment through the SEEK program. But outside of that, the no-till pasture hayland renovation is I think the primary practice under the FAP program, where it kind of encourages folks to reseed their existing hayland without having to till it up.
Right. So, I mean, which is great. Well, what we were wondering is what other practices could be added to this, or that we could investigate that people think would really improve, what the problem is, which is basically like, people are spraying manure and super dry. They just cut really short and it's like running off. So anyways, if people have ideas, please contact me at UVM, because we're trying to put together some research and like a little mini program. And then once we have some sort of stats from that, then we were hoping to talk with, of course, like, the FAP program, people to come up with like some helpful things to get farmers to change.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in anything you guys, any of the kind of thoughts that you have on that. We'd love to discuss it and learn a little bit more. I think some of the ideas I've heard in the past are just, raising the height that folks are harvesting their hay at. It gets a little more complex when you're doing it, 2, 3, 4 cuts a year. So I think part of it is the balance of like what we have the ability to administer and provide oversight for, and then what we can, provide an incentive payment towards. So, based on maybe an additional cost that the farmer has to incur in order to manage that land in a different way. Just to give you some sense of what we're usually trying to consider in those conversations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I see Chip and Jill. I don't know who wants to go first.
Go, Chip.
Sorry, I think that was just left up. I'm gonna take it.
Okay.
This is really just, I'm seeing a lot of new people on this call, so I thought I'd ask the question for their benefit. How do you expect the shift to funding through clean water service providers to impact Agency of Ag programs?
Thanks for asking that. It's definitely a good thing to mention. So under let's see if I don't have this in front of me, so I'm going ad lib here. Under the clean water service providers, there is a certain amount of reductions that are going to be assigned to occur on farms within from natural resource projects. So there'll be a huge emphasis, on folks who have experience and expertise in wetland easements, wetland reserve easements, and wetland improvements, as well as other natural resource type projects. If folks are working with a farm, they'll be recommended to work through our existing programs. If they're working with or interested in working with someone who might not meet the definition of a farm, e.g. they're not eligible for our programming, that is an opportunity to go through the clean water service provider model to help attain financial assistance towards that practice. So to give you an example, maybe we've got a really small backyard operation and they just have this, they've got one animal on a really small area of land and they need to have some better resources or system to manage whatever they have going on. That might be an opportunity to go through the clean water service provider model to support that non-farm to implement a water quality practice. And I just saw, there are a couple of NRCS folks on the phone, so I want to give some space. We got a couple minutes left, but when we design our cost share rates, we are almost always trying to push people towards NRCS as an organization that has a higher expertise and capacity for providing technical assistance. If they're in an active NRCS contract, we cannot pay on that same practice under state programs. But we can also provide a bridge. So if you have NRCS staff and you're working with a farm to sign them up and it's not going to be until next year that you can get them under an active contract, the agency program can help kind of bridge the gap between now and when they're under an active contract for a federal payment.
Hi, Nina, this is Carissa.
Hey. How's it
Hey,
going?
this is outside of NRCS, but have we ever thought about talking to custom applicators or custom people who do the hayland cutting?
So we interact with custom operators, but pretty much just in the regulatory forefront. So ensuring their kind of annual certification and fee payment. So we definitely have the opportunity to provide some more information, and it could be a good avenue for just reminders. We haven't, at least in my knowledge, we haven't gone towards, you know, programs or incentives specific to custom applicators and their duties.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that pop into my head that would that are far reaching and broad based if we could. And so custom applicators, if they had the most up-to-date technology and stewardship equipment, and I know this kind of, this may be way outside your window, but it's also saying it out loud for anybody on the call. Custom equipment, so if their mower height is at 3 inches and that's it, they can't raise it at all, that might be an issue. And then, you know, we lost rendering services the last couple of years, and composting on farm has been an issue. So I think those are more infrastructure and services aspect, but they definitely affect the landscape and the water quality. Thanks.
Thanks, Carissa. Yeah, I misspoke. They are custom operators and applicators are eligible to apply for SEEP. But I think you mentioned some really great points that we're not really addressing, even within the SEEP program, which can, you know, assist with manure equipment or reduced till equipment, but it doesn't really address hay equipment at this time. And I don't think we have anything going on to address really like rendering services or composting on farms or any incentives to help improve the management of that. So thanks for your input. Well, it's not often we end meetings on time these days, but I don't know, Allie, if you want to add any closing remarks from the partnership perspective, but I'll just say, you know, thank you all for being here. I'll put my phone number and email in the chat if you want to follow up, have some other discussions, and thanks to all of my other team members who hopped on today to help out.
Thank you so much, Nina, and thank you everybody who joined in. I'll be sharing the recording of this event in the listserv, as well as a reminder for all of the upcoming webinars. So we hope to see you there.